barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rest. Right now it's time for hemp.
Thank you for taking time for hemp. I'm your host, Casper Leitch. You are listening to Time for Hemp all around the world on Tumblr, SoundCloud, iTunes. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Oh, well, Michael wrote that he heard crickets, and I thought that there was no sound.
No, the cricket was when it was quiet.
3, 2, 1. Thank you for taking time for hemp. I'm your host, Casper Leitch. You are listening to the live broadcast. Oh, that's right. We're not live. We're now pre-recorded, thank God, so that when we have goofs and technical problems, we never let the audience know. It is Healthy Mondays today, and on Healthy Mondays, we put a focus on what medical cannabis can do for our body, our spirits, our minds, and our souls. And we like to bring a spotlight to the amazing group of people at Patients at a Time. And, of course, they have two fantastic founders involved with that organization, Marilyn Mathry and Al Byrne. Good morning. How are you doing today?
We're doing pretty good there, Casper. Thank you again for inviting us on Time for Hemp for Healthy Mondays. This is Al Byrne and Marilyn Mathry, and we're here representing Patients Out of Time. You can find information about this educational charity at medicalcannabis.com or patientsoutofTime.org. We've been in business now for about 20 years as a Virginia corporation and educational charity, and our mission has been and continues to be the education of healthcare professionals in the United States, along with the general public of the United States, about the therapeutic value of cannabis and the necessity of understanding the cannabis relationship with our own endocannabinoid system. In fact, that endocannabinoid system exists in all living creatures on Earth except insects. So if you're also an animal lover and you have pets like cats or dogs or llamas or something, you must understand, or you should understand, that not only you and your children and your brother have an endocannabinoid system, but so does your dog and your horse. And if you want to understand the proper maintenance of that system, you need to understand how it interacts with cannabis. And that's what we as an organization do for years and years. The concentration on healthcare professionals is essential because healthcare professionals in the United States are basically unlearned about medical cannabis and its applications. They're not taught this in medical school or nursing school, with the exception of Temple University in Philadelphia, who's the first and best in the country right now in that regard. But essentially, your doctor, your nurse who came out of their schooling 5 years ago or 15 or 50 doesn't know anything about what I'm talking about, but they can learn what I'm talking about if they go to www.themedicalcannabisinstitute.org. I'll repeat that. Themedicalcannabisinstitute.org. Here, a doctor, a nurse, a pharmacist, etc., can find accredited online education about the endocannabinoid system in medical cannabis. They pay a fee for that educational credit, but it's small and it's reasonable. And better yet, they learn something that they need to know. And so we emphasize on this program a lot that when you check in with your medical doctor, your dentist, your veterinarian, your nurse, ask them, what do you know about medical cannabis? What do you know about the endocannabinoid system? And if their answer is nothing or marginal knowledge, you recommend to them that they learn. And if they don't learn, that you might go and consider getting another nurse, another veterinarian, another doctor. That's just our opinion, but it's a good opinion. It's backed up by the research of the world. The American research is lacking. Research around the world is not lacking. There are at least 27 countries in the world right now that use cannabis medically, and they're not throwback places, but rather they're very much advanced countries like Spain and Canada and Portugal. countries that have, in some cases, been using medical cannabis now for a number of years, while our country denies its use, at least at the federal level. You also should understand, no matter where you're listening and what part of the world, that cannabis is used medically in 23 states of the United States of America, as well as the District of Columbia, where our president and our Senate reside. It is also available in the Virgin Islands that are controlled by the United States, and Guam and other territories. So it's not an unknown factor here in the United States, but it is seemingly not recognized by our federal government. And the reason is it's not recognized by our federal government is because doctors and nurses have abdicated their responsibility in this area, and the responsibility has been adopted, accepted, and monitorized by our law enforcement personnel who just don't want to give up locking up innocent, nonviolent marijuana patients and give up those heavy paychecks they get every year of $150,000, $60,000, $80,000 for rounding us all up. So that's my opinion. But the guest we have today is not new to anybody that listens to this show or this program, Time for Hemp. Michael Krawitz has been an advocate and a leader in this whole area for at least a couple of decades. He's a very good friend of Marilyn and Al, so we are biased. We work together in several different ways. We work at Patients at a Time. We work together with Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access. And Michael is an advisor to me at Veterans for Compassionate Care, which we will talk about sometime at length. But today, Mike's going to report to us for a very recent trip he took to Europe, Switzerland, where he represents Patients at a Time and many other organizations that are involved in the medical cannabis issue for us all. And he has been doing this for, I guess, about 10 years. So let's welcome Michael, and we're going to hear about his adventures over there in Switzerland. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Al, Mary Lynn, Casper. Thanks everybody for having me on. Indeed, I did just come back from Geneva, Switzerland. The first time I ever went over there, it was the World Health Organization Expert Committee on Drug Dependence.
Okay, well, why don't you just rattle on, Mike? Tell us why you went, who you represented, and if you could summarize it, what went down, and then we'll get into the more specific stuff.
Sure. I think as a brief overview, the basics that you would want to understand before you start talking about any of the particulars of this trip is that at the United Nations, with regard to drug policy, you have to realize that this isn't a top-down, handful of governments telling the rest of the world what to do, like maybe some other areas of interest at the United Nations are. In this case, it's a consensus-building group that once they've come up with consensus, they then implement policy that they then agree upon in sort of a gentleman's agreement amongst nations. There's no self-enforcement. There's no blue hats that are going to show up at your door if you don't enforce the drug control treaties the way that the power brokers would like them to be enforced. Having said that, just to finish that thought, it is true that the United States government has been one of the chief enforcers of these policies worldwide. And if you don't toe the line, you don't get favored nation status trading with the United States. And that's been one of the levers, interestingly, at the United Nations that's prevented countries from departing from the program. And now with legalization in the United States, it's prevented the United States from really carrying out that task. Russia is just not up to it. Russia is not able to step in and do what the United States did, even though it seems like they might like to do that. And China, I don't believe, is in the position to do it, independently either, even though they also seem to be very motivated to continue down this drug policy prohibition road. The World Health Organization makes recommendations on drugs to the Commission on Narcotic Drugs. And the Commission on Narcotic Drugs is a commission made up of 53 member nations who hold seats. They're voted in by the General Assembly of the UN. And those 53 member nations represent the world on that commission. They make drug policy. They set the rules. But the parameters, the universe of the decision-making process at the Commission on Narcotic Drugs is determined by what the World Health Organization says. The WHO sets the guidelines. They set the room for different policy options that the Commission would then operate in. And that's the way it's supposed to work. Lately, if you study ketamine and you look at what's happened at the World Health Organization with regard to ketamine, you'll see that there is sort of a battle between the World Health Organization and the Commission on Narcotic Drugs, where the Commission would seemingly like to just eliminate the World Health Organization's advice and be able to come up with their own recommendations and then act on them, have all the power, so to speak. So that's kind of the lay of the land. And cannabis hasn't been officially reviewed. The only official review process at the World Health Organization that would result in a recommendation, again, to the Commission on Narcotic Drugs that would set the ball in motion for policy change at the UN, you never believe it. 1935 was the last time that this was considered. So a critical review is what they're talking about there. And until we get that critical review at the World Health Organization, we won't see any change in drug policy on cannabis at the United Nations that's substantial. Now, for medical marijuana, we really don't need a change in drug policy at the UN. What we need is the world to better understand drug policy at the UN, because most often the reasons that are used against medical marijuana by the various countries, including our own, the United States government has very often used the international treaties and our obligation to those treaties as a reason not to allow us to reschedule, not to allow Dr. Craker to grow his old cannabis, etc. And those are excuses. Those are not grounded in the treaty. As best as we can tell, working over there with the treaty and with those who understand what the treaty means and says, that's just an excuse that member nations use to prevent access to cannabis for medicine. Medicinal cannabis is protected by the treaty, and in fact, the governments that have signed the treaty have signed onto a responsibility to make sure that we have access. So it's quite the opposite of the interpretation that the DEA has taken. Now, I went to the World Health Organization Expert Committee on Drug Dependence, which is more specifically the committee that takes in the evidence and resolves the documentation that then sets the basis for the recommendation of the World Health Organization that goes off to the UN Drug Control Program. So I went and testified in Geneva before this commission with Steph Shearer representing medical marijuana on the planet Earth. There was about 8 doctors there representing ketamine issues, and then the 2 of us representing the cannabis issues. And without really working together very closely on our speeches, Steph and I seemed to pretty much cover it all without overlapping each other at all, just by covering it from our various perspectives. Me talking about it from patients at a time perspective, and the veterans perspective, talking about our history and our experience with cannabis at the policy level in the United States, and giving them a little bit of history lesson even of their own history, which is dotted with Anslinger-esque type stuff, William Randolph Hearst yellow journalism kind of leakage into the system. And I think we did pretty well. It's still a ball in play. We don't have the update. This was not a critical review. This was an update, which some have said is not legal, is actually not according to the program as it's set up. The responsibilities of the World Health Organization are to do a critical review when it's needed and then update that when it's needed. It's an open legal question whether you can update a critical review that was done in 1935 and update it in 2015. I don't think that's valid. I think that we would need a new critical review, and then you could, a year or 2 down the road, update that. But I think, updating this is like trying to put, Bluetooth on your Model T Ford. What do you think, Al?
Well, I was thinking that you were going to be talking, so I had my microphone on mute. But, let's go back a little bit, Mark.
Sure.
You're a wordy dude. Let's go back a little bit. just so I understand it, so everybody can, you started off by saying this drug control policy is basically controlled by 53 countries.
Yep.
Out of what, 180 or something.
Yep.
I mean, what's that about anyway? I mean, why isn't everybody in that? Is there some sort of selection process to eliminate people for a reason, or what?
I really, you're asking a great question. That's the first one I think I've been asked. That's just right above my pay grade. I really couldn't answer that thoroughly. My understanding is that those are the member nations with the greatest interest and the greatest amount of resources in play. But that may be an error. I really don't know the process, but I can tell you that there is a process by which that the member nations that are part of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs are chosen. And there's even more of a process by which the member nations that represent the Commission are chosen, the chair and secretariat of the Commission, which the chair of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs right now, I believe we have a new chair that's come in. The president of the INCB is from Africa, and I think the chair, I don't want to speak out, I'll have to look it up, but we do have a new chair of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs, and then the secretariat of the Commission is the UNODC, the so-called UN Drug Czar, and that's the United Nations Office on Drug Control and Crime Prevention, and that's a Russian by the name of Fedotov.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, the Russians are as hardline as the government can be, along with the United States, about that. We don't want drugs, and the drugs are bad kind of stuff. So it doesn't seem to me that having a Russian in there is a step forward.
Well,
look, we got a minute. We got a break.
Well, just to use a minute for a second to defend the president of the UNODC, the head of the UNODC. I can tell you that even though he's a Russian, the UNODC has operated really independent of the thought of those member nations that are in control of it. That is, they really do take their job seriously, their role of their office seriously, and although they are from their country, whenever they're speaking, they're still an ambassador of their country, and he can't wiggle away from Russia's record and anything that they're doing in Ukraine or whatever pops in, even in drug policy, as we're at the UN. Having said that, they have been pretty fair with us, and the office has worked well with NGOs. I want to encourage folks out there to engage this process. We have a civil society task force we could talk more about after the break.
Well, okay, and we will, because there's a lot of people, of course, in this country that have great distrust of the United Nations. They see that as a threat to some degree of sovereignty of not only this country but others, and they don't like that. And I think that what you see is an ability or chance to inflict some education into the process that they have, so that they're not quite as comfortable as they might be just spouting off their individual party lines, whether it be the United States or Russia. Well, anyway, with that said, we'll come back with Mike Krawitz here in just a few minutes. And right now, we'll go back with Casper. And please pay attention to those folks that support Time for Hemp and buy their products.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.
THCF Medical Clinics are the premier physicians clinic in the United States. THCF has offices all across the United States from Hawaii to Michigan. THCF Medical Clinics has helped approximately 150,000 patients obtain their medical marijuana permits to legally possess, grow, and use medical marijuana. If you have chronic pain, multiple sclerosis, or any other neurological degenerative disease, or if you have any gastrointestinal disorders such such as GERD, irritable bowel syndrome, or if you have AIDS, cancer, spastic disorders, seizure disorders, or glaucoma, call us at 1-800-723-0188 or visit us online at hemp.org. Again, the number is 1-800-723-0188 and the site is hemp.org.
Body pollution, the right kind, medicate, stimulate, raise your runs the choice we make ourselves, but others cross this global place, all out with the troubles that bring time to pass, bring us all together for this, we're on the right path, sunset, on the Dr. Farm, leaves the faithful these days we pray, here, with our open arms, love to the people, across the nations that are blazing all, for the good of all, thanks to the sun of all over the we're calling. Amongst the stars, summer rays of love falling. Love falling. Love falling. Love falling. Love falling. When you're falling and falling in love. With minds to refine the baseline, lyrical flow will show that the unseen colors of this rainbow, knowing that life will lead uncertainty, seems finished by adversity. So spread wide, don't hide integrity, calling on nations to unity and peace. Spread wide, don't hide. We are the brothers, mother, calling on nations to forgive one another. Sunset on the Dr. Farm, please play for these days we pray. Here with our open arms.
Sunset on the Ganja Farm. You know, that's going to be happening soon in the United States. And we're going to have lots of ganja farms coast to coast. We have industrial hemp crops being planted now legally in the United States, and more states are going to be embracing that wonderful industry and making a cash crop for our farmers to benefit from, as well as making it possible for medicinal cannabis to be available to patients, and they will no longer be considered a criminal when they go to the pharmacy to get a refill. How groovy is that? Also, speaking of ganja farming, we are ganja farming on the timeforhemp.com website. You can go to timeforhemp.com, and we have a camera turned on right now as we speak, aimed at a grow room that's going to be cleaned up and then turned into a grow room, taking the plant from seed to plant to bud to harvest to dry to smoke, and then all the extra cannabis that's produced from the garden is being donated to medical cannabis patients in the Oregon area. They're legal farms, and we're going to be starting out with a small grow so that you at home who are allowed to grow can be shown different ways to make the most of your space, giving lots of great tips on how to make the most of your plant. And then every 16 to 17 weeks when we harvest, we're going to rebuild the garden, only bigger and bigger and bigger. And at the end of 2 years, we're going to be watching a whole greenhouse full of ganja plants getting strong and tall. That's my hype and promotion for our timeforhemp.com website. I would encourage you and your friends to go and check it out. All right. Thank you for letting me do the hype. I pass the joint conversation back to my joint host and our joint friends here at Time for Hemp, Mary Lynn and Al. Oh, yeah, well, I know, Michael, you're always a friend, but I like to have Mary Lynn and Al, introduce the guest. Yours.
Thank you, Casper. I guess you're putting a new slant on the old saying, what are you doing? I'm just laying around watching the grass grow.
Exactly.
And for those people that are younger people, please excuse Casper. The word groovy, we haven't used it in decades here. He's old. It means, you feel good.
I keep trying to bring that word back.
Michael, let's maybe you can. We'll see. We'll work on that. We'll quote you all the time saying Casper's groovy.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Casper is, and Mary Lynn and I are, and Michael is we're all U.S. military veterans. We served at different times in different services, but we all are brothers and sisters here. And we're going to get to that in just a few minutes. We're going to talk about the Veterans Administration and its relationship with U.S. veterans. But, Michael, we got to finish up the story on the World Health Organization, known by everybody, I guess, as WHO. And it is the World Health Organization, so this is a world broadcast. There are people listening all over the globe to what we're saying. So what Michael is talking about, no matter where you may live out there in the world, this information has an effect on you and your country as well. Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Al. And I will definitely comment. Casper, thanks for the great work that you do, and I really look forward to watching the plants grow. And for all you young people out there, make sure before you post any pictures of the garden on Facebook that you pull off and park the car first. Okay, that's all we ask. But it gives a whole new saying to lying around watching the grass grow when you can do it on your smartphone, huh, Al? So, but the World Health Organization fits into a puzzle. And I was talking before we went to the break. I got a little bollocksed up when I was trying to tell you the chair of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs. And the chair of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs right now is a fellow from Thailand, Ambassador. I won't even try his first name, but it starts with Artha. And then Srisamoot. 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 And interestingly, he holds a Bachelor of Science degree of Government and Economics from Monmouth College and a Master of Arts degree of Social Sciences from University of Chicago. So, while this is someone who's the ambassador of Thailand, he went to school right down the street from us, in a sense. And the board of the UNGAS has the previous chair, the UNGAS being the big drug summit that's coming up, has its own little governance just to make sure that it wasn't a patchwork quilt of running this big meeting where all these world leaders are going to meet in April 2016. And the previous chair of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs is the chair of that board over the drug summit, and that's Ambassador Khalid Shama from Egypt. And both of these ambassadors are both chairs. So we sort of have two chairs right now. We have the chair of the CND and the chair of this drug summit working group, if you will. And right now, what we're looking at with this World Health Organization document is a ball in play right in the middle. Picture you got the ball in play out on the field, and you've got another whole action that's going to happen to the ball while it's mid-flight, just literally yanking the ball right out of the field and bringing it on the side to another field and playing it for a while. And that's what I see happening with this World Health Organization process if we play our cards right. Because the World Health Organization, like I said, has the say on how we handle, in this case, they're looking at ketamine and cannabis. And those two are hot potatoes right now in this whole process as we come into the drug summit. And a lot of people are looking at the drug summit as a dead ball. If you're looking at the language of the resolutions and the statements that the world leaders are going to make, well, how long do you think in advance do you get 80 or 100 world leaders to sign on to a document? How long in advance do you think you'd want to reach consensus on that? I would want to reach consensus a year before I put the damn thing up. So that's probably what they've already done. They've worked out most of the fine print a year before the drug summit. But we have ball in play. We have this World Health Organization process actually happening, and the result of it can actually influence this process, in a very real way, even though we're in the middle of a drug summit, and all this process is laid out. So that's again, all stuff that I'm alluding to way above my pay grade. I hope ambassadors and heads of state and various great thinkers out there that we're associated with can really work with this. And towards that end, I work with you guys, patients at a time. I represent Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access personally. I'm the executive director. And those two are the key elements that I took to Geneva. But I was also there, and Steph was there as part of an international medical cannabis patient coalition. And that is made up of organizations from all over the globe. We're approaching, I think we're over 50 organizations now from Europe. And it's a really great collection of minds and a great collection of activists working on the medical marijuana issue focused on this international process. And I encourage those out there that want to learn more about this process, the World Health Organization, cannabis review process. We're really the ones carrying the ball on that, and that's the International Medical Cannabis Patient Coalition, IMCPC. As we get into this drug summit, we have a couple of mechanisms that we have created for us non-governmental organizations, us NGOs, to participate in the process. One of them is the New York NGO Committee. That's something that I've been very heavily committed to. And through the New York NGO Committee, we've embarked on a kind of a project, big group of different NGOs, also from Vienna, the Vienna NGO Committee, and from around the world, working together to answer questions and do all kinds of questionnaires and things like that to put our input into the process for the UNGAS in a collective, kind of organized way that the UN system can chew on and digest. And that's called the Civil Society Task Force. And we're going to be hopefully having a meeting coming up, sort of in the middle of everything in February, right before the March meetings leading up to the drug summit in April. And that is definitely stuff to watch. It's stuff to participate in. There's a lot of different entry points. If you're an NGO, you can join directly with the New York NGO Committee. But if you're an individual, you can join any number of the organizations that we're working with at that level. Human Rights Watch, Harm Reduction Coalition, Drug Policy Alliance, of course, Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access, the International Drug Policy Consortium, the Open Society Foundations, et cetera, SSDP, Students for Sensible Drug Policy and Law Enforcement Against Prohibition have been real leaders. So there's a lot of access points for an individual. And all those organizations I just mentioned, we're all working together. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention on that same line before we close it, Dave Borden with the Drug Reform Coordination Network, StopTheDrugWar.org, has come up with a coalition as well, which is U.S. organizations focused on amending the treaty as needed for, proper regulated system, getting rid of death penalty, in the drug policy arena, things like that. And that's quite a large coalition now, over 100 organizations with, again, Human Rights Watch, Drug Policy Alliance, many organizations I've already mentioned as signers there as well. Really, really great thing to check out at StopTheDrugWar.org. So, but I guess you wanted to...
Yeah, just again, I just want to tell everybody, just because you're bragging up everybody else, Patients Out of Time has been a factor, or is involved in all of the organizations that Michael has just talked about, as has Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access.
Yep.
And I proudly serve on the board of directors there, and as has Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access, which is a company based in Washington State that intends to treat veterans, intends to really get veterans to withdraw from opiates and pharmaceuticals by using cannabis as a first medicine, not a last medicine. But just to reiterate, all of these folks and these organizations are working together. Over the years, most of the organizations have developed some sort of specialty, and it is these specialties which Mike collects and brings together into a coherent form. And keep in mind, if these NGOs had not, under Mike's direction and Lennis Worth and other people have been doing this for years, if these guys had not stepped out and done this initially, the United Nations would not have any counter conversation at all. They would have the same bombastic bullshit that the United States puts out as drug education, which is, of course, false and misleading and just downright lies. And they don't have any counterpoint. So it is important that you understand as listeners that these conversations do change things. As Mike said, as much as I'm a cynic, Mike isn't, and I don't know about a Russian, because I'm thinking that Russian's going to just echo whatever his country wants him to say, just like our ambassadors would. But if they do have some sort of an open mind, if the WHO is approaching this as a medical question rather than a political question, Mike, then it does seem to have a lot of value, and people should support these things. I agree with you.
Well, I think there's two different factors.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about veterans.
Well,
let me talk about veterans.
Let me hold on just for one more second, though. I think there's two important factors there when you're dealing with like the Office of National Drug Control Policy there at the UN, the UNODC. One is they follow the evidence, and we're all about the evidence. I mean, we own the evidence, and I don't mean that in a flippant way. I mean that everything that we thought and we tried to do has been supported by evidence, whereas everything that the drug warriors thought and wanted to do has not been supported by evidence. There's no evidence supporting prohibition as a good idea. There's plenty of evidence supporting cannabis as a good idea, and I think that. You really have to consider that. But also, there's this kind of devil's arithmetic going on. And, when you and I go to the State House in Virginia and we get up to that podium and speak for 5 seconds or however long they give us, they recognize that we're representing a lot of people in Virginia that probably feel the same way, that are sort of standing there with us vicariously at the microphone in their mind. And I think the same thing happens at the United Nations. We're there. We're a member nation. We're the nation of cannabis, and we represent 1 billion people on Earth that like this plant, that like to wear it, like to eat it, like to smoke it, like to drink it, whatever. But we like the plant. We like to cultivate it. We like to be around it. We like it, like we like our dog, and we like it a lot. You take it away, and we're very, very mad. And I think that if we had any other thing that brought us together, we would be a nation. But we're not a nation because cannabis just goes with everything else. So, if we're a hippie, we're a cannabis hippie. If we're a right-wing radical, well, we're a cannabis right-wing radical. We're all brought together by cannabis. We all like music. We're all kind of interesting people, and that's kind of where the similarity ends. But when we go to the United Nations, they do recognize that we represent this huge chunk of humanity. And we have a couple of ganja-looking people there at the UN. Our friends from NCOD always make sure there's a couple of people circulating the halls of the United Nations that look the part, have a headband on or some sort of cannabis aficionado clothing, hemp wear, that's very obvious. It's like the colors of our nation. And when we're there at the UN, it's China and Russia and the United States and us, and we negotiate. And we negotiate in formal ways and informal ways. But don't cut off any of those lines of communication.
Okay, I'm with you. But look, we're going to have to talk about veterans because we need to get that information out too. And we got just about a couple of minutes, and Casper's going to want to take a break again. Let
me give you a quick rundown of where we're at, and then we can go from there. We have 3 bills in Congress right now that are all veterans bills. One part of a larger thing, that's the CARES Act in the Senate, but it has the elements of our Veterans Equal Access Amendment from the House built into it. And then we have a Veterans Equal Access Amendment-like thing in the Senate as well. So we've got all these balls in play, and what they're all trying to do is the same thing: force the hand of the VA to recognize cannabis as a medicine and be a more active participant in that. They'll allow Veterans Affairs doctors to write recommendations and to freely discuss the pros and cons of cannabis with patients inside the VA, which is important to recognize that right now they're under a threat from the DEA. So we're essentially combating the DEA through the VA is kind of the big picture there. But that's what's going on, with the VA. And the VA medical marijuana policy expires in January of this next year, January 2016. So this is all very timely, and we're really crossing our fingers that the VA is going to with a new medical marijuana policy that's a little more broad, talks about cannabis as being used for post-traumatic stress, maybe neuropathic pain was already covered, maybe some of the other issues that come up, chemotherapy, nausea relief, trauma, brain trauma, and seizure disorders, MS-like symptoms, and things like that.
Talk about that. Yeah, let's talk about that when we come back, Mike, because that's important. And you just worried a bunch of veterans. What's he talking about? This is going to expire in 2016. Well, we'll explain it when we come back, folks. Don't get too worried too quickly.
Are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.
Serious Seeds is your source for quality cannabis and sativa seeds. Serious Seeds are the creators of legendary strains like AK-47, Bubblegum, Chronic, Cali Mist, and White Russian. The AK-47 is probably the most awarded strain on the planet. The high THC content of AK-47 makes it the perfect medical strain for patients seeking quick pain relief. Cali Mist is an almost pure sativa. Female medical cannabis patients have reported that this strain helps relieve menstrual cramps. Serious Seeds just acquired another Dutch high-quality seed bank, Magus Genetics. From now on, Serious Seeds can offer you even more award-winning strains. The fine folks at Serious Seeds strive to breed the best cannabis genetics that they can find, so patients can rely on the effectiveness of their medicine. Go to SeriousSeeds.com to grow your medicine. That site again is SeriousSeeds.com.
It is Healthy Mondays on the Time for Hemp, a growing network. We are a growing team of people dedicated to ending prohibition all around the world. And speaking of growing, don't forget to check out the live 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week garden on the timeforhemp.com website. We're going to return to our joint conversation here on the Big Joint broadcast. And please remember, like a good joint, Time for Hemp is always best when shared with friends. Marilyn, Al, and Mike.
I just want everybody to know that Marilyn really is here. I don't think you said a word today. But let's go back, Mike, to the VA policy of medical cannabis briefly as it stands. The fact that directive that the VCMA had a lot to do with is going to expire, but I believe you and I and Mary Lynn all believe that it will be rewritten and republished in a different format, and we can talk about that. And then I guess we can answer. Can we ask the question of you? Why don't I ask you a question? Michael, what happens if they don't renew this directive? If the policy of treating veterans in VA hospitals in legal states simply expires, what is it, January 16, 2016, what would that mean ethically in the whole Veterans Administration medical world, nursing world? It would seem to me that it would be there'd be a mutiny.
I'll go ahead and answer them in turn there. The VA medical marijuana policy, of course, grew out of a hypothetical question that we presented, Marty Chilka and I and the ACLU and you guys all working together, presented to the General Counsel of the VA, which was written by our buddy there from O'Shaughnessy's, Fred Gardner. A simple, very simple little question, but deceivingly simple. I wouldn't have come up with it quite as beautiful as he did. And it was just, very straightforward. If a veteran in California, let's say, was following the law of their state and using medical marijuana per doctor's orders, should that veteran be punished at the VA hospital? It would seem so, based on those that we've talked to inside the system. And interestingly, that question was kicked back to us as not a legal question, but a medical question. And even more fascinating to us, we actually got an answer from the Undersecretary of Health. And that answer was so profound and so to the point that it actually grew into through what you might call a parlay in the New York Times front page cover article's attention to the issue. We parlayed that into a VA medical marijuana policy. That was in 2010. And that basically had three parts to it. That if you were a veteran using it legally per state law and using it under doctor's orders, then that was not a violation of policy at the VA. And that should be treated like any other medicine, as far as the doctor should look at it like any other medicine. Are there some drug-to-drug interaction problems, whatever, but not legal issues. And a couple of other factors were they made it very clear that their VA doctors were not allowed to recommend it. That was the line in the sand that they recognized the DEA is presenting to them. And then they finally put an icing on the top saying, well, it's, federal grounds anyway. The VA property is federal property, and if you have pot on federal property, you can be subject to arrest. There's nothing that they can do to protect you from that. A state law won't protect you from that. If some wily officer presses it hard enough, there's really nothing that could stop that from happening. And they wanted to warn veterans. So that was the three parts. And interestingly, they updated that policy to 2011. In 2011, from 2010. And the only big changes that they made were they took out some of the language that they put in the first version about how cannabis was currently being used by veterans. A lot of language that they had culled directly from the CMCR, the California Medical Cannabis Research Group documentation, which is what we handed them initially to digest and to understand how veterans were using this in the system. And they did digest it, and they put it right into the policy. It was part of the first version. The second version, 2011, had an expiration date, 2016. Frankly, I never thought they'd let it go to 2016. But then again, if I thought about it, the government, I would have expected that nothing other than them letting it go all the way to 2016. The government always puts things off to the very, very, very deadline. In fact, you've seen the government, and I've seen the government actually close and be shut down because they exceeded the deadline. They don't respect deadlines. So anyway, that's the deadline issue. But the policy itself, if they just decided, let's just forget about it, well, two things. One is the policy is just reiterating the letter from the Undersecretary of Health, which was just reiterating the ethics. As you astutely pointed out, Al, it has to do with the ethics involved. And it is never ethical to punish someone by taking away their medicine. So anyone who's had their medicine taken away, saying with the system telling them, oh, you violated the rules, or you failed a drug test or anything like that, that's a punitive measure. That should never happen, and it can't happen. You have to fight it. It's difficult to fight, but it is fightable. And the policy has really never been our tool to fight it. Having said that, the policy is extremely symbolic. It means a lot to a lot of veterans out there. There's 25 million vets in the system, and a couple of million would get very, very aggravated if the policy just disappeared and we started really complaining about that. Mutiny is one way to put it. I just think it would be very uncomfortable for the VA to really deal with the fallout of that, because it's not just going to be us. It's going to be like 10 angry senators and congressmen as well.
Right. Listen, Mary Lynn, what is from a professional nurse, a registered nurse, given that order, you've worked as a Navy nurse. If you were treating a patient and then all of a sudden you woke up and it was February and you couldn't do that, what is your obligation?
The dog spoke for you.
Dogs decide to make their statements. They don't like it at all. Yeah, that's a tough one because the whole thing is so screwy to begin with. Just that directive, as much as we loved it to allow veterans to get an okay from a civilian doctor and then use cannabis as long as it wasn't on VA property, that was all well and good, but we still had that problem of treatment by geography. So vets who happen to be in states without a medical cannabis bill were still kind of left in limbo. So say I was working in a VA hospital in a medical state, and now I'm able to be okay with this patient. Yeah, and that thing directive got reversed or rescinded, whatever term we'd want to use, and nothing to replace it. Yeah, that would cause extreme problems ethically. To see the benefits that it brings to patients, and then to see no scientific basis, just a political, opposition, no basis for them taking it away would clearly be an ethical issue for me, which, goes back to patients out of time. I mean, our whole thing is there's a long, long history of medical cannabis. The science supports it. Everything supports it. The whole prohibition is unethical. So, it's a tough one. It's a tough one for all those in the VA hospital because, I
don't think it's a tough one.
Well,
I think what they should do.
It's an easy decision.
Yeah,
it's tough to play out.
I think Michael's suggestion that this is an opportunity for the Veterans Health Administration to exceed the minimums that they've determined in the initial documentation by specifying that the use of it, for instance, for whatever, Mike, TBI, post-traumatic stress, there's a way of writing that directive where it should open up. I mean, after all, now I don't know how they work in there, and the VA seems to be a mystery to a lot of people, including a lot of people that work for it, but they have been observing veterans of all ages, of both sexes, with all kinds of injuries, using cannabis in 23 states and D.C. for a period of time. And those observations should have been written down and that data collected. And some of that information has to say that, I got a couple of guys here that are using it for post-traumatic stress and they're doing great. And so maybe we'll see an expansion. What do you think?
One of the problems, Al, is that we're getting caught in both nets. That is, picture you have a bunch of nets out there and you got fish that are getting caught in every net. Oh, I caught the fish. No, I caught the fish. So the psychiatrists are saying, look at all these people showing up in drug treatment that use pot. Pot must be a problem. And then all these other people are saying, well, look, all the people that are showing up with lower overdose rates that use pot. Pot's good. And all
right, listen, we got to do this again.
Okay.
We just ran out of time. There's still a lot of conversation here about this issue for veterans, so let's plan on bringing you back here pretty quick. But for right now, thank you. I got to give my goodbyes here so let everybody know that Patients Out of Time can be found. Information about that organization can be found at medicalcannabis.com. It can also be found at patientsoutofTime.org. And just in case you missed it, online accredited information, education about the endocannabinoid system and therapeutic cannabis, clinical cannabis usage is available at themedicalcannabisinstitute.org. So that's it for today. Thank you, Mike Krawitz. We'll be back same time, same place next week. And for now, this is Al Byrne saying take care.
Look at all that money, yeah, the money that...
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.